Alright, it is time to rank another soundtrack, and this time I'm going to be doing Monster Party on the NES. As always, I'm just doing the stage themes, so no opening theme, no boss battle, though there are several boss battle themes, the final boss battle, or the ending, or cutscenes. So there are 8 stages, but stage 1 has 2 completely different parts to it, depending on which half of the level you're in, so 9 stages total, or 9 songs total. As far as the titles go, I've got the levels listed as how they're described in the manual, but I've also included what level number they are, or round, as they're referred to in this game. I'll preface this like I always do, with the disclaimer that this list is just my opinion. It's arbitrary, it's subjective. It's fine if your opinion doesn't match mine. In fact, I encourage discussion and debate, so feel free to leave comments on your opinion of the soundtrack. I'll also say, before we start, that this particular soundtrack doesn't have a lot of complete songs. Just about all of the stage themes are fairly quick loops of 10 to 15 seconds. So there's not going to be a lot to talk about. For each entry, it'll probably be a fairly quick run-through, but I still think this is a soundtrack worth talking about. So without wasting any more time, let's get on with the list. Number 9, Haunted House. I try not to let stages I don't like ruin the songs, but this song, if you even want to call it that, is just as irritating as the fucking stage. I can see what they were trying to go for as far as sacrificing melody for the sake of mood, with the whole wind effect, and I'm assuming is wind chimes in the background, but the whole thing is just nails on a chalkboard. It's fucking grating. It's worse when playing the game than listening to the loop, due to the fact that the song abruptly cuts in and out every time you enter a door. Constantly, just makes it worse than it already was. The whole thing is jarring. It's not scary at all. If the purpose of the song was to put you in Mark's frame of mind of being batshit insane, then mission accomplished. Otherwise, much like the wind sound effect that they use in the song, it just blows. Number 8, Heaven's Castle. This one is whimsical and pretty. The one thing, though, is that it sounds a lot like Round 7's song. In fact, I didn't even really notice it changed when I first played it, and even not just the first time, but several times after, I hadn't even noticed that it was a different song. I thought that it really was just a repeat of Round 7. For the longest time, I thought they were the same song. So number 7 is Round 7, or The Tower. So naturally, since Heaven's Castle was more or less the same or a similar enough of a song, this one had to be next on the countdown. The one reason why I like this one a little bit more than Heaven's Castle is that there seems to be a little bit more variance with the chord progression. But overall, it's very much like Heaven's Castle in the sense that it's got this glossy coat on top of it. You know, that whole whimsical sound that I had mentioned earlier. Number 6, The Lake. Just a very simple sequence. It's very lighthearted and pleasant, which is a contrast to a lot of the rest of the soundtrack. And it's got a decent melody. But again, very simple. Number 5, Entrance Part 1. This one is pretty repetitive, even by short loop standards. But while the riff itself is pretty forgettable, there are some interesting elements behind it. Like the background track has this little accent that fades in and out, and the general tone of the instrumentation is good. It's very upbeat, very fast-paced, and I tend to think that faster-paced loops are easier and quicker to get tiring because they don't last as long. It's like you hear it 20 times over at the same rate that you'd hear a slower loop 5 or 10 times, so naturally you're going to get sick of it faster. So this one is a bit of a mixed bag overall, but it has its redeemable qualities. Number 4, The Dungeon. I like the pulsing bass in this one. It's really steering the ship of this song. The lead instrument is behaving more like the rhythm, which is why the bass kind of leads the way. Technically, this is one of the longer loops because at the end of every other fourth measure, there's a different pattern. Like I said, technically it's one of the longer loops because of that variation at the end of each segment, but that doesn't stop the fact that those four measures that come before that variation are also kind of repetitive too. But it is a cool sound, and I like the riff quite a bit, actually. Number 3, The Castle Ruins. This one's very hypnotic and floaty. The fact that there's no percussion leaves a lot of empty space, which gives the riff room to breathe, and the reverb effect that is on it adds to that trancy ambience. This song succeeds where Haunted House fails in terms of mood over melody. Number 2, The Cave. Similar to The Dungeon, which was the preceding stage, this one has a pulsing bass too, but the lead synth is the focus on this one. It's got a very hooky sequence, and it flows so seamlessly back to the beginning of the loop. I mean, all the loop transitions in this soundtrack were well done, but this is one of those transitions that feels more like a continuation rather than something starting all over again. Of all the songs on this soundtrack, this is the one that I wish had another section of it more than any of the others. I feel like it would have been a more memorable piece of NES music. And number 1, The Entrance Part 2. So in the middle of round 1, when the big statue thing freaks out and everything gets gory, it's one of the coolest triggered events on the NES. And the change of music from Part 1 to Part 2 is part of the reason it's as effective as it is. It didn't hurt that this is the best song in the game, too. It's by far the creepiest. It's very dreary and dark and ominous. It's also one of the more complete songs in the game. It goes off into a second section. The end part in particular is pretty chilling. So that will do it for the Monster Party ranking. Here's a quick recap. At number 9 was Haunted House. Number 8, Heaven's Castle. Number 7, Tower. Number 6, The Lake. Number 5, Entrance Part 1. Number 4, The Dungeon. Number 3, The Castle Ruins. Number 2, The Cave. And number 1, The Entrance Part 2. So, what did you think of the list? What was your opinion of the soundtrack in general? What did you agree on and what did you disagree with in terms of the list itself? So that'll do it for this soundtrack, and we'll see you next time.